So that's the beauty of this model is we don't do any marketing. We're piggybacking on existing demand, right? So we're not creating these new listings from scratch and having to drive traffic to these new listings. When we're selling a product, we're literally jumping on a listing that people are already buying, right? As long as we're priced appropriately, we're gonna make sales on that listing. We're gonna get into what's called the buy box, which is, when you go to look at an Amazon listing, that's the add to cart or buy now button.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the podcast that inspires action and helps you to grow your side hustle into a thriving income stream. I'm your host, Joan Posivy. There are multiple ways to sell on the world's largest online marketplace, but today we're diving into one we haven't explored on this show before: Amazon Wholesale. The model involves purchasing products in bulk directly from manufacturers or distributors and reselling them on Amazon under, get this, existing product listings. That last part is key because it means you're not reinventing the wheel. You don't have to spend money on marketing. Our guest today, Gamin, explains how it all works. He's built his now 7-figure Amazon wholesale business from the ground up, starting as a side hustle before leaving his corporate software sales job to go full-time. In our conversation, he shares how to break into wholesale, including actionable tips and even a ready-to-use script to help new sellers be taken seriously when reaching out for the first time to manufacturers and distributors. We learn about the affordable software stack that Corey relies on to analyze product performance, calculate profitability, and choose from millions of potential products. He also shares valuable tips for beginners, including revealing mistakes that he's made along the way and how to spread your investment across multiple products to reduce risk. And my personal favorite, how to simulate buying decisions before spending a dime on inventory. But before all that, if our chats are sparking your entrepreneurial spirit and providing valuable insights, consider giving the show a caffeinated thumbs up by shooting me over a virtual coffee. It's a real thing over at sidehustlehero.com/support. Thank you so much. Now here's my conversation with someone who loves sharing tips, tricks, and strategies for building a profitable Amazon wholesale business, Gamin. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you so much for having me, Joan. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I find this business that you're in so interesting. Now, I know there's a number of moving parts to this, but essentially you're buying products at wholesale pricing from brands and then selling that inventory through Amazon for a profit. But give us an overview, if you would, of the business model. How does it actually work in broad strokes?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you pretty much just summed it up. The business model at its core is very simple, right? We're buying brand name products that are already selling well on Amazon. We're finding them at usually at a wholesale price, either buying directly from the manufacturer or buying from one of their distributors, and then selling on Amazon on listings that already exist. And we're just tapping into that existing demand. So what's different from our model compared to what some people do on Amazon, we're not creating our own brand from scratch. We are not doing much marketing, right? We are literally locating products that are selling well, finding them at a good price, and more or less flipping them on Amazon. And that's pretty much the business at its core. Now, there's nuance to it, as I'm sure you know. There are a lot of moving parts, and there's even a couple of sub-business models within this model that you could kind of go after. But at its core, that's the gist.
Wow. And we'll get into it, but it sounds like you're tapping into products that you already know that there's demand that are selling rather than experimenting with something new.
Exactly.
Oh,
That is it. Yep.
Huh. Well, you haven't been doing this forever. This started as a side hustle, right?
It did, yeah. So it started as a side hustle for me right out of college. So I graduated from college in May of 2017. It's actually funny because I stumbled upon the selling on Amazon opportunity when I was in a hotel room in Saigon, Vietnam.
Okay.
In January of 2017, I'm on a study abroad program with a couple of folks in my graduating class. I'm sitting around the hotel room. I've got a couple of hours to kill. I know graduation is right around the corner, and I had about a 2-month gap between graduation and starting my first full-time corporate job, which was with IBM. And I'm sure, just from our, brief interaction, I feel like you're kind of in the same boat with me when I say I'm not the kind of person that can just sit around and, take it easy for 2 months. I'm like, I've got to be moving. I've got to be making money, got to be doing something.
Right.
So I'm sitting in this hotel room in Vietnam and I'm on YouTube typing in the classic, how to make money online. Right. Right. And
Been there, done that. Yeah.
yeah, as I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience have as well.
Sure.
And so I stumble upon this video from this guy named Reezy Resells, who has actually gotten to be a good friend of mine, which has kind of come full circle. But in this video, he's going into stores like Marshalls, TJ Maxx, these types of stores. He's scanning products on clearance and he's comparing them to the pricing on Amazon. And when they're profitable and they're selling, he's buying them and he's flipping them on Amazon. And I was sitting there, I'm like, I didn't even know you could sell on Amazon. I just thought everything I bought on Amazon I was buying from Jeff Bezos, right? So come to find out, this is a business that a lot of people are practicing. So fast forward about 5 months, May of 2017, I graduate from college. May 22nd, which is 2 days after graduation, I start going around to a lot of different stores in my town, looking for products that I could buy low and sell high on Amazon. Pretty much that simple. And that was 7 years ago. It was a side hustle for the first 2.5 years, just about.
Okay.
And actually, sorry, 2 years exactly. And then at about the 2 year mark, it's funny, I wasn't even making that much money on Amazon at all, but I just really didn't like my job in corporate America. And I was like, you know what? It's time to make the jump. If it crashes and burns, it crashes and burns, but I'm 24 and I don't think that I have much to lose, right? So that was kind of the logic there. Luckily, didn't have to go back.
That's a really good point that you've made too, because I'm often asked, when should a person transition from a side hustle to full time? And it's so dependent. And one of the things that you just nailed was your age at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what if this thing doesn't work out? No big deal. I've learned a lot and I could always get a job with IBM or a competitor or do something else. So it wasn't a matter of you saved up all this money and 6 months expenses and all that. You just dove in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Now, luckily, so my dad, he's been an entrepreneur for pretty much his whole life. He's a State Farm insurance agent. He knew what I was doing with the Amazon business, and he was willing to invest some capital into the business in order for us to get off the ground a little quicker, start scaling a little quicker, because this is one of those businesses where you definitely have to spend money to make money, right? It's capital intensive. We're buying inventory. We're and the more you can spend, the more you can make. So I had him kind of supporting at least the business side, but it was very clear that, hey, if this goes south, you gotta figure something else out. So luckily I had that backing, but yeah, we were pretty much figuring things out along the way. And that was about 5 years and some change that we made the jump to full time.
Okay.
5 years ago, I guess that would be.
Okay. And so you started out basically in arbitrage?
Exactly. Yep.
Right? Buying these things at a discount, selling them on Amazon. But now you're reaching out to manufacturers, distributors. How did you break into that? Just starting out, how did you get them to take you seriously?
Yeah, great question. And so you mentioned arbitrage, right? Which is exactly what I was doing before what I do now, which is called wholesale. So just again, to kind of educate the audience on the difference between the two. So arbitrage is what I described earlier, which is the YouTube video that I saw where you're going to a Walmart or you're going to a Target or you're going to a Marshalls and you're scanning the clearance aisles and you're just looking for that deal, right? You're almost like treasure hunting. And when you find a deal, you flip it on Amazon. That is much lower barrier to entry. Anybody can do that with as little as $500 and start selling on Amazon today, right? So like you said, it's like, well, how did I transition from that to what we're doing today, which is called wholesale, which is, I like to think of wholesale as arbitrage on steroids. It's basically professional arbitrage, because instead of me going to Target, buying 10 units and looking for that next deal, I'm now calling the distributor that Target buys from. And instead of trying to buy 10 units at a time, I'm trying to buy 1,000 units or 10,000 units or 100,000 units at a time. Now, because we're buying significantly more, we're getting better pricing. We're getting wholesale pricing, right? That's why it's called wholesale. Yeah. And, sometimes we're getting terms, we're getting credit with these vendors, and it's just a much more scalable relationship-based business than arbitrage.
Right. And you're not spending your time running around town trying to find these deals, really not knowing what you're going to get or not, what you're going to come across, right?
Exactly. And people have, in fact, I heard a quote somebody said last week. They were like, arbitrage is almost like you're starting a new job every week, right? You're always looking for that next deal. You're always on that hamster wheel. And don't get me wrong, arbitrage is a fantastic way to make money. I know people that are selling 7 figures. I know some guys that are selling 8 figures per year doing that. They've got a team of buyers that are going to every Target in the state. They're renting U-Hauls. They're driving all up and down the coast to try to, chase after these specific products that are on sale at every Target on the East Coast, for example.
Yeah.
And they're crushing it, but that just sounds like a nightmare to me, to be honest.
Logistically, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if somebody doesn't have access to that financial backing, it sounds like it's a good way to break in because you don't need a lot of capital. The arbitrage route initially.
It is the best way to break in, right? Because it's much lower risk because I'd rather somebody, take a quote unquote risk to test the market on 10 units of a product that maybe costs them, $10 a unit. So they've got $100 at stake, as opposed to starting out with wholesale, which is what I'm now doing, and maybe starting with $1,000 at risk, for example. So it's just lower barrier to entry, lower risk, and helps you get your feet wet as an Amazon seller.
One of my earlier Amazon episodes was with a top seller, and her line was risk a little, learn a lot.
Yes, I love that. That's very accurate.
And it's great to get that education at that lower price point than when you're dealing with not only 10 or 20 units now, but 1,000 and up as the zeros get added on. Do you remember that first order that you did land?
Yeah, so I remember the very first product I ever bought to sell on Amazon, and I also remember my very first wholesale order, which is called a PO, right? A purchase order for those in the audience that might not be as familiar. So my very first product that I ever bought to sell on Amazon, period, was on, and again, I remember the dates, like I remember everything. It was May 22nd, 2017 at a Salvation Army thrift store on Battleground Avenue in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is my hometown. I bought a C++ coding textbook that was on the rack for 50 cents. And it's so funny because I remember I bought I scanned the barcode to kind of look at the demand on Amazon. I'm looking at the numbers. And I remember I had that analysis paralysis. I'm like, should I buy it? Am I going to make money? Is this going to work? And I'm like, dude, it's 50 cents.
I was just going to say, it's all 50 cents.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to buy this. I'm out 50 cents worst case. So I bought that there. And I remember I sold it for like 14 or 15 bucks. It actually took it took multiple months to sell because I didn't have a good grasp for the demand. I saw, okay, I can pay 50 cents and sell it for 14, but I wasn't factoring in how long it was going to take to sell. Now, obviously the ROI on that is fantastic, but the cash flow is not as great. So that was the very first thing I ever bought to sell on Amazon. The very first wholesale order, the very first wholesale purchase order that I bought to sell on Amazon, I believe was these lawn and garden products. So I was living in Chicago at the time. I was cold calling a bunch of manufacturers trying to get my foot in the door for that first wholesale order.
Sure.
And this company that I called, they're a tool and die manufacturer that happened to be located in Chicago. And so the person that I'm talking to on the phone, she was the number 2 at the company. And I was pitching her on why she should sell to me, why she should allow me to become an authorized reseller of their products on Amazon. And like 97% of manufacturers, she's like, well, hey, we've already got our Amazon sellers. We don't need any more. Thanks for calling. And I was like, listen, I'm in Chicago. You guys are in Chicago. At the very least, let me come by the plant, introduce myself. If you hate me, I'll walk right back out the door. But, what's the worst that can happen, right? I can at least educate you guys on what I'm seeing with your brand on Amazon. And she was like, okay, fine, right? So I show up to the plant, sat down with her, sat down with the owner and CEO, whose dad actually started the company.
Nice.
So naturally, he's very protective of the brand on Amazon and elsewhere. But luckily, we hit it off. And we placed a wholesale order with them right there on the spot. I think it was like $2,400, somewhere in that range. And we were off to the races, and we ended up working with them for, I think, about 3 years. And it was fantastic. It was kind of lucky, but you make your own luck in some of those cases.
Oh yeah, because you could have totally said, well, thanks for your time, and hung up the phone, right?
Yep.
I mean,
exactly.
That speaks to how important that personal handshake, one-on-one, eye-to-eye contact is with somebody.
It's everything. And just last week, right? So again, that was beginning of 2019, that story. fast forward to today, it's November 2024. I still meet my vendors face to face. I go out of my way to meet my vendors face to face. Last week, we landed a new vendor here locally in Charlotte, which is where I live, and we could have had them just ship the order to our 3PL, which is essentially our outsourced warehouse, to process the order like they normally would most of our orders. But I'm like, you know what? They're 15 minutes down the street from me. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to pick it up and throw it in my trunk, right? Because it was kind of like a small test order because we haven't carried the brand before.
Okay.
I was like, I want to meet my sales rep face to face. So I showed up, shook his hand. We chatted for 5 to 10 minutes. He helped me load the order in my car. And he was like, hey man, like, this is great. You know, I don't get to meet a lot of my customers, but hopefully this is kind of the foundation for future business. And so I'm like, this is so worth it, right?
Yeah.
Even if we never buy anything from them again, it's just getting those reps in, of having those conversations, getting face to face, building rapport. I mean, it's sales. That's what it is at the end of the day. And I know you know that.
And now you've got this personal connection versus he's just got your name.
Exactly.
That's fabulous. Yeah. Well, these days, how do you decide what products to sell? That's got to be mind-boggling. Where would you even start?
Yeah, good question. So there are quite a few different methods that people use and that people teach to locate products to sell. So my personal favorite method is to start with the brand. All right. It's like, let's locate which brands are selling well on Amazon that appear to be reseller friendly, meaning, you know, chances are they're going to allow me to sell the product on Amazon. And there's ways and things that we look at to determine that. But the general high level process is, let's locate a brand that looks good. Let's locate a couple of specific products from that brand that we can inquire about. And then let's just literally cold call the brand, ask if we can open a wholesale account, and ask for pricing on those specific products. Because where a lot of people go wrong and where a lot of people get stuck is they'll cold call a brand or a distributor, and they'll just say, hey, I'm an Amazon seller. Can I buy your products to sell? And they're like, no, we get 150 of these calls a week, right? But when you call them up and you say, hey, my name's Corey Gamin. I own a retail business here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Your product line came across my desk, and there's actually 3 specific products that you guys have that we're interested in carrying. Now, I have the exact quantities that we're looking to order right here in front of me. And if pricing looks good, we can place an order today. So who there in sales should I send this order to? And when you frame it like that, it's completely different conversation, because they're like, oh, Corey, he works for a retail business. Sounds like he knows what he wants. Sounds like he's serious.
He's ready to buy. Yep.
Yeah, he's ready to buy. Let me put him through to John in sales and let's get this order processed, right? It's all about positioning when you're calling these brands and when you're calling these distributors.
Well, how would you even go about, again, locating that product? Because there's literally millions of products on sale for Amazon. So how do you drill down on that? You can't be doing it all manually.
No. So, the old way was to do it manually, right? So when I started it back in 2019, the wholesale business specifically, it was a lot of manual work. It was literally typing in a keyword or looking into a category on Amazon and going page by page by page and looking for products that might make sense, right? Nowadays, we use a tool. It's called Smart Scout. It's just one of the many Amazon SaaS tools on the market.
Okay.
And one of the beautiful things about Smart Scout is you can drill down into a category, into a subcategory, even into a specific brand, and then set some filters to where I can say, hey, I only want to see brands in the tools category that sell between $10,000 and $50,000 per month that are not carried by Amazon, right? Because we look to avoid competing with Jeff Bezos, quote unquote, right? Whenever possible, because Amazon's going to undercut us and kill our margin. So we'll enter a couple of those specific filters. It'll give us a list of any of those brands that meet our criteria. And from there, it's just, let's Google the brand's website, find their phone number, and give them a call.
So from a consumer standpoint, then it's being fulfilled by Amazon and I'm still getting the Prime deal or whatever, but I'm actually buying it from you, not Amazon.
Exactly. And so that is what a lot of people, I'm surprised these days by how many people don't even realize that. I think it's about 60% of products sold on Amazon come from third parties like me, as opposed to directly from Amazon. So you mentioned fulfilled by Amazon. So let's let's dive into that a little bit too, because I want to kind of educate the audience, because they might be thinking, well, wait, if it's shipped by Amazon, but it's sold by you, like how does that work? So the way our business model works is, again, let's say we're buying 500 units of this pen, right, from a distributor or from the manufacturer.
Sure.
So we've got 500 units of this pen. How do we get it live for sale on Amazon? We take those 500 units and we ship them to Amazon, right? So we send them to Amazon's fulfillment centers. Amazon receives them. Amazon says, hey, Corey, you sent us 500 pens. We have all 500 in inventory. Now they go live for sale, right? Now customers have the ability to buy them from me. And when a customer buys an individual pen from me, Amazon then ships that individual unit out to the customer, right? And the reason why this model works so well is because I get to do all my shipping up front. So I get to ship all 500 pens in one go and be done with it. And then when customers are buying, one or two or three pens at a time from me, Amazon's just fulfilling those orders. And that is what allows my inventory to qualify for prime shipping, right? And when you think about it, it makes sense, because if I'm shipping every individual pen myself to the customer, Amazon has no way to guarantee that I'm going to get it to their customer in 1 day or in 2 days, right? So this is Amazon's way of like, hey, we're going to control the fulfillment process. We're going to control the experience. You just get us the inventory and we'll take care of the rest, right?
And it allows the consumer to feel more confident as well, because they're dealing directly with Amazon.
Exactly. And the returns go directly through Amazon. It's a seamless process. If a customer has, really the only time we deal with individual end customers is if they have a question about a product. So Amazon does have like a customer messaging portal within our seller account. And we get messages from customers all the time. Hey, is this product compatible with XYZ? Hey, how many come in this pack, right? And so we'll answer those customer questions. But in general, I consider my quote unquote customers to be my suppliers, right? My vendors that I'm buying from, because those are the people I'm pitching on, hey, you should work with me, as opposed to the end customer. The end customer just is looking to buy and they don't even know it's coming from me. Right?
Yes. I remember when my book first came out, The Way Success Works, on the Canadian side, at least, it wasn't print on demand. I was physically sending them the books. Now, in the case of, say, your pens, you're going to receive that box of 500, but you can't ship it to Amazon just like that. So, because it needs to be, the packaging, the individual packaging and barcode and all that good stuff. Do you do that yourself, or do you pay Amazon to do that? How does that work?
Yeah, and very good question. So I mentioned earlier that term 3PL, right? So again, and I know you're familiar, but for the audience, a 3PL, it stands for third-party logistics. And think of a 3PL as an outsourced warehouse, right? So I used to own a warehouse. We didn't even rent one. We bought one in Wake Forest, North Carolina, where we'd buy from suppliers ship to my warehouse in Wake Forest. We label all the products, we put them in boxes, and then we physically ship them off to Amazon. And what I realize is that I suck at running a warehouse. I'm really bad at it. Two, I didn't like it. I was having to travel, 30, 40 minutes one way to my warehouse. I'm managing low-skilled labor that is notorious for not showing up on time, or, they're just not performing a lot of times. And the talent pool in Wake Forest, North Carolina, I hate to say, is not too big. So it's really hard to find good, dependable warehouse workers. And so one day I was like, you know what? Forget this whole warehouse thing. We put it on the market. We had it sold like a month later, and we outsourced the whole logistics side of our business to a 3PL. So now I can focus on what I'm good at, which is sourcing products, closing suppliers, building relationships, building the team. And then that lets the 3PL focus on what they're good at, which is shipping and logistics, which is my weakness, right? It's like, why would I double down on my weakness when instead I could just outsource my weakness and double down on my strength?
Yeah. And it looks like Amazon's got the whole warehousing thing down to a science. So maybe a little bit more than your operation there in North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So how do you choose products? Is there a certain price point? Is it higher end stuff or lower? What are the parameters of how you're picking and choosing?
Yeah, so I love higher price products, right? So I personally prefer to sell products in the 50, 100, even we sell some products in the $300 to $400 price point range.
Okay.
And the reason I like to sell these higher ticket products is because typically there's less competition, because again, it takes a lot of capital to carry good inventory of a product that sells $400 a unit. So tends to be a little less competitive on the higher end, as well as a little more profitable in terms of dollar profit.
Right.
So that's the first part of the question. I target higher end products. But the second part of the question is like, well, super tactical. What makes you decide to pull the trigger on a product? So my personal criteria is, as long as the product is going to make me at least $250 per month in profit at a gross margin of 12% or higher, then I will buy it, right? Now, it's impossible to guarantee. It's like we have no guarantee that this product's going to make me $250, but based on the market as it sits right now, based on the data that we're looking at, based on the historical trends of this product, I can make a pretty highly educated guess. And, at this point, 7 years into my Amazon selling career, be correct 80 to 85% of the time, right?
Yes.
There's always those products where, you're like, oh, this is going to be a great product. We're going to make so much money on this. And then something completely unforeseen happens where maybe a competitor decides to undercut you by like $30, and that's your whole margin. And you've either got to wait for them to sell out, which might take a while, or you've got to just match their price, liquidate, and move on, right? There's unforeseen things that happen all the time. But in general, that's kind of the process. It's very, very data driven.
And it sounds like you've probably experienced both those things. Times when you've sat on the inventory, assuming that you're thinking, okay, this is not going to go out of favor at some point, we can sell it, or let's cut our losses and just get rid of it.
I have so many.
Yeah, okay.
That's happened so many times. And I'd say probably the worst case of that happening, and I'm going to tell this story, and I certainly don't want to scare the audience, but this was after we had started to scale, and this is just one of those things that happens. So there was a product that we were selling. It was a very high-end marine two-way radio, right? So we were buying it for around $142, and we were selling it right at $200. We were selling it at $199.99. And the reason I like this product so much is because we could not sell it any lower than $199.99. And what I mean by that is a lot of manufacturers have what's called a MAP policy, right? I see you nodding your head, so I know you're familiar. But for the audience, MAP stands for minimum advertised price. And what that basically means is the manufacturer tells all of their resellers, hey, you are not allowed to price below $199.99 in this case,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, we're buying for $142, we're selling for $200, we're making about $20, $25 profit per unit after factoring in Amazon's fees, and it's great. This was halfway through the pandemic where this product was really scarce. So as soon as we could get our hands on it and get it into Amazon, it was selling like overnight.
Nice.
And our profit was virtually locked in because nobody was allowed to sell under 200. So this was like a slam dunk product. But unfortunately, what happened is, so up to this point, we had been buying, $10,000 worth at a time, $15,000, $20,000. And our supplier tells us, hey, we just had a big shipment come in. You guys can get first dibs because you've been buying a lot of it. If you want to buy all of it, it's yours. And it's about $75,000 worth of inventory. And it was between two products. It was a black radio and a blue radio. So I said, awesome, we'll take it. This has been our best product. We'd love to take all of it. So we bought all of it, spent $75K. We send it into Amazon. It checks in. The day that it checks in, we get an email from the manufacturer. Hey guys, we've decided to get rid of our MAP policy so you guys can price this wherever you want. And I remember being like, oh no, like,
you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. So, and as you can imagine, the price goes from $199.99. The next day, somebody decides to get cute and cut it to $195. Within 2 weeks, it's at about $180, and we're losing, $5 to $7 per unit if we were to sell at that price. Now,
because of all the other expenses you've got involved, yes?
Exactly,
okay.
Yeah, because you get the Amazon seller fees, they end up being on average about 30% of your revenue. So we hold our price high thinking, okay, well, maybe other people will sell out, maybe the price will jump back up because we knew supply was scarce, but come to find out people just kept undercutting each other little by little. And after about 30 days, I'm like, we're sitting on 75K worth of this inventory. It's not looking like it's coming back anytime soon. So you know what? Let's cut our losses. We're going to lose a good chunk of money, but we're going to get some capital back to reinvest. And I think when it was all said and done, with the price fluctuating by the day, I think we lost about $8,000 in total. So we spent 75 after we had sold everything and paid the expenses and all that.
Yes.
I think we had about 68 that came back, right? Which we were expecting a 20% ROI. So we spent 75 expecting to get back like 95, but we spent 75 and ended up getting back like 68. So it was not great, but and there's many situations like that I could go into, but
Yes. But just as an aside, looking at that scenario, if the same thing were occur today, would you not do the same thing again? Like knowing what you did back then?
that's the thing is like, we did everything right. There's if I was in the same situation, I would have done the same thing again. So that's kind of what I said earlier is sometimes things happen that are just totally out of your control. 10 to 15% of the time, stuff like that happens. But as long as you're data driven, as long as you're going based off the numbers and not based off emotion, then you're going to win long term. And I'm, again, totally guilty of making emotional decisions many times. I'm still to this day trying to get better about that. But
and you're the only one, Corey.
right. Yeah. If only.
You mentioned data driven. Is that the Smart Scout software that you mentioned? Is that where that comes from?
Yeah, so there are three main tools that we use to make most of our decisions. So Smart Scout is what we use to identify brands of interest, right? So we'll use Smart Scout to kind of locate, all right, what brands do we want to go after? We use a tool called Keepa, Keepa, to show us the historical data on every product on Amazon. So there are tens of millions of product listings on Amazon, and Keepa has historical data for every single product on Amazon. So the way Keepa works is it shows information in a graph format. And with the Keepa Chrome extension, which is what I use, it just populates a graph on the listing page. So I click on the listing, graph pops up, and it shows me all of the historical data, such as the historical demand, the historical price points, the historical competition. Has Amazon ever sold this product, et cetera, et cetera. Keepa tracks it's like 250 data points per product.
Wow.
So again, we use Keepa to kind of make our decision based on, all right, what has kind of the average price been? And we can kind of base our decision off that. And then the third main tool that we use is called Seller Amp. And Seller Amp is what actually tells us, is this going to be profitable? How many can we sell? And are we even eligible to sell it, right? Because there are plenty of brands and plenty of products that we are what's called gated on, meaning Amazon does not allow us to sell those products for a number of reasons, right? It could be that the brand does not allow Amazon to let third-party sellers sell that product, all the way to, some brands are fully locked down and you just can't sell them.
Would that seller app basically have be able to tell you what Amazon's cut is? Is that part of what it does? Okay.
Exactly. So it's Seller Amp, AMP. So Seller Amp, it really answers three questions. Can I sell it? How many am I going to sell? And how much money am I going to make? Right? So it answers those three core questions. And then as long as you know how much the product's going to cost you, as long as you have your buy cost, you plug that into Seller Amp, it tells you your profit, estimated units sold, and are you eligible, right? Are you gated or are you not gated?
And there's a cost for these tools, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I'm an affiliate for these, but I'm not the owner of these tools. So I don't really have a dog in the fight. But Smart Scout, I believe the lowest tier is like $27 a month. I'm on the, I think, $150 a month plan because I just need some more data that's on the lower tier. Yeah. Keepa is, I want to say $20 a month. And then Seller Amp is also about $20 a month. So, but when you think about it, you're talking really less than $200 a month total.
Yes. Okay.
Even on the higher Smart Scout tier for the three core tools that pretty much could help you build the foundation for a 7-figure Amazon business, right? So at the end of the day, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what it can generate you.
Because there would be so much data there.
Oh yeah, it's truly it's all about data. It's all numbers.
As far as expenses to run the business, is that pretty much it? Obviously, you've got your inventory costs, those software pieces, because that's going to tell you how much of a cut Amazon's going to take. And I'm actually surprised it's as high as 30%. Is that what you said? Wow.
Yeah. So, and the thing too is, so it really depends on the price, so the price point of products that you're selling. So again, if you're selling those higher ticket products like I am, traditionally my Amazon fees have been about 27, 28% of revenue. But if you're selling these lower ticket, $15, $20, $25 products, then Amazon fees are going to be higher in terms of a percentage of your revenue. It might be 32, 33% of your revenue. Now,
Right.
you asked about expenses required to run the business, right? It really, and we run a pretty lean operation. So our main expenses are our software stack, my salary, our salaries for our virtual team members in the Philippines, liability insurance, and then trying to think. Those are the main, like those are just the main fees, right? There,
Yeah.
of course, we'll use some one-off tools here and there and things of that nature, but in general, that's it.
How are you marketing?
So that's the beauty of this model is we don't do any marketing. It's
Really?
because remember what I
Okay.
mentioned earlier, we are piggybacking on existing demand, right? So we're not creating these new listings from scratch and having to drive traffic to these new listings. When we're selling a product, we're literally jumping on a listing that people are already buying, right? As long as we're priced appropriately, we're going to make sales on that listing. We're going to get into what's called the buy box, which is, when you go to look at an Amazon listing, that's the add to cart or buy now button. That's called the buy box.
Okay.
And you quote unquote get into the buy box by simply being the lowest priced seller and ideally being Prime eligible, right? So as long as you meet those two things, you're at the very least going to rotate in and out of the buy box and make sales that way.
So
we're
you're not
doing
actually
marketing.
you're not actually uploading the photo and doing the whole script. None of that?
None of that at all.
Really?
Exactly. And that's, again, that is why this business model is significantly more, I'd say, beginner friendly than other Amazon business models like a private label, right? I'm sure you're familiar with private label, which again, for the audience is essentially you're creating a new brand from scratch. And when you're creating a new brand from scratch that nobody's ever heard of, you got to market the heck out of that thing. You got to put a lot of money into advertising. You've got to get you just got to do a lot of marketing, period. Whereas with our business, we don't do hardly any marketing.
So that's really interesting. And the other question I was going to ask you, and you've partially answered it then, if you've got a product there that already has, we'll say 3 sellers, and one of those sellers, maybe they've sold 500 of those units already, because that would be showing on the Amazon storefront. Me as a consumer, I'm going to pick the person who's already sold those 500 units because I know they're reputable versus the person that's just getting into this business. So I guess the strategy then would be, do you initially go in as the lowest seller, hoping that you'd get some sales for people that are willing to take a risk for a lower price?
So that's a really good question. So Amazon does a really good job of essentially almost disguising who you're buying from, right? So what I mentioned earlier, the buy box, the name of the game is how much can I be in the buy box? Because obviously the longer you're in the buy box, the more sales you're going to make. Now, Amazon typically doesn't really care if you're a brand new seller, if you've been selling for 10 years. In general, the buy box algorithm just prioritizes who's the lowest price and who's Prime eligible. So that is what allows brand new sellers who have no selling history to compete with some more established sellers, because Amazon will put them in the buy box as long as they're priced appropriately and as long as they're Prime eligible. And the customer's none the wiser, right? Because the customer just sees fulfilled by Amazon. Yeah, they see, sold by XYZ new seller, but I mean, less than 1% of Amazon customers are clicking on that seller's name, looking at their storefront. How many reviews do they have? They don't care. As long as there's a buy box and they can add to cart, they're good to go. You see what I mean?
Yes. So in my example, then, when I see that 500 units have already been sold, that's of that product, not necessarily
Correct.
Specifically linked to that seller.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, you're talking about the new, and Amazon actually just rolled that out within the last year, where you go on Amazon, you search a product, then you see a bunch of listings where it says 800 plus units bought this month, or 2,000 units bought this month. That's not bought from that specific seller. That is total of that product bought across all sellers. And honestly, that data point is ever since Amazon added that data point, it's been very helpful for us as sellers, because up until then, we never know exactly how many units are being sold. Yeah, Keepa will give us an estimate and SellerAmp will give us an estimate, but we never know for sure. So when Amazon added that X amount bought this month badge, that is the most concrete sales data we have until we start selling that product ourselves and say, hey, I literally sold 100 units this month, so that's how many I'm going to sell. See what I mean?
Yes, yes. And getting into that buy box, that makes your example even more clearer about that marine product.
Yep.
That you weren't featured anymore if you kept it at
Exactly.
$199.
Exactly. Yep.
I want to loop back just for a moment. You made a point when I was asking you about how you price things. You mentioned making $250 a month. Could you clarify that for me? Say, for example, in those pens, I mean, they're going to be selling for maybe 10 or 20 bucks. What's the $250 in there?
Yeah. So really the goal is to make $250 in gross profit on a product, in a monthly period. So for example, to use the pen example, if I'm going to make, let's just use round numbers. Let's say my profit is $2.50 per pen is what I'm projecting. Then as long as I'm estimating that I'm going to sell 100 pens per month, $2.50 per unit in profit, then that meets my criteria, right? It's not necessarily $250 per sale.
Right.
I wish that was the case. If that was the case, I'd be retired by now, but unfortunately that's not the case.
Okay. And you're looking at that, basically that's just a number that you chose that's your comfort level. This is what I want to make for my time and effort and building the company.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I teach sellers, I have students within my community that I advise them. I say, hey guys, my criteria is $250 in gross profit. As a newer seller, you might be thrilled if you're making $50 per month in profit on a product. That's great. It's a product that's worth it for me, might not be worth it for a mega seller, right. But a product that is not worth it for me might be, a gold mine for a newer seller. So that's why I say that criteria is very subjective to you, also how much capital you have available, your personal situation, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So what are you hitting now in terms of annual sales for your Amazon business?
So the last few years, we've been between 3 and 4 million per year. I want to say in 2022 was our best year. We did just over 4. And then this year we're on track to do about 3.5. And so Q4 is always best time of year for retail, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm expecting really next week with Black Friday, and then the week of December 14th through the 21st is always just such a great week. So hopefully, awesome. As long as those 2 weeks go well, I think we'll end the year right around 3.5.
Fabulous. And I appreciate you, given the time of year it is, carving out time for us today. Yeah. So that's gross revenue. How much of that do you get to pocket?
Yep, good question. So with Amazon Wholesale, because it's more of a volume business, typical net margin is going to be between 5 and 8%, right? So I pay myself a pretty healthy salary. And after my salary's paid, I think last time I checked, lifetime over the whole course of the business over the last 5 years, we're at about 4% net. But if you were to factor my pretty healthy salary back into our net profit, we're closer to 7%, right? So this is by no means a high margin business. This is not selling a course. This is not selling a community. This is, I'm buying a pen for $10 and I'm selling it for $20 and I'm making $1.50, right? That type of thing.
And you're building up a company.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's, this is also one of those businesses where it does take a good amount of time to get momentum. You've got to, my very best supplier, my very best brand that I buy from, I followed up with them for 3.5 years before they agreed to sell to me. And they didn't just finally agree to sell to me. They were like, okay, 3.5 years later, now you get the chance to pitch. And so I pitched, and luckily they liked it. And I've been working with them for about the last 2 years, and they're fantastic. But if you're trying to make quick money, or you want to just, a quick business where you can run for the next 6 months or so, don't do this. Don't start
saying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by having you wait 3.5 years too, they were protecting their brand too, knowing, okay, this guy's still around. He's serious. We're willing to trust him. So
yep.
That takes time to build. So for the beginner wanting to get into this business, where would they even start? What would be some first steps for them?
Yeah, great question. So, best way for beginners to start is to target these small to mid-sized niche brands that have a presence on Amazon, right? Maybe they got a couple of products on Amazon, but maybe they're not doing crazy volume, right? Maybe they've only got a few products and these products are selling 10, 20, 50, 100 units per month total. That's where they want to, those are the brands they want to target. That's how they want to get their foot in the door. The last thing I would ever recommend a new seller do is, hey, go buy some Nike products or go buy some Milwaukee tools and compete on these super competitive brands that everybody else is trying to sell.
Right.
Instead, let's go find that brand of like industrial fasteners that everybody else is just overlooking.
Yes.
But you can sell it for a 17% margin and there's minimal competition because people don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to sell fasteners on Amazon. Right? Like that's what I always recommend. I always point people to the unsexy niches, the tools, the automotive, the industrial, the patio, lawn and garden, that type of stuff.
Oh my gosh, Corey. And so often too, when it comes to side hustles, that's where you make the money too, is the really
Yes.
not sexy, under the radar. Like one of my favorite side hustles is picking up trash around industrial units early in the morning.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Right? Like it's, when you look at the
100%.
margins, it's crazy.
Well, and another, I mean, shoot, we could go on a tangent on this, but in college, every summer in college, I had a pressure washing business. So we'd go door to door, me and a couple of my buddies, we'd go door to door in my neighborhood, knock on the door. And this is the summer in North Carolina. So it's like 95 degrees. We're pouring sweat. And these homeowners, a lot of them just felt bad for us. So they hired us. But I mean, we're talking, we're talking over $100 per hour cash as a college student for standing out in the super hot weather, just pressure washing a driveway, back and forth, back and forth. It's ugly. It's not sexy, but dollar per hour probably was the most profitable thing of anyone that I knew that was doing it at the time in college.
And I bet you for some of those homeowners too, at the end of it, not only it was the $100 cash, but also a glass of lemonade or a beer before you go, right?
Yeah, you'd be surprised how often it's like they'd come out like, hey, do you guys need water? Do you guys need anything? And I always had my jug. The craziest thing too is I would drink an entire jug of water during some of these pressure washing jobs, and I would sweat all of it out. Like wouldn't have to use the bathroom at all. I would just sweat it out. It was crazy.
Well, what's a realistic budget for someone just starting out?
Yeah, good question. So if you're going to start off with wholesale, right, which is my business model, I always recommend people have at least 5,000 to 10,000 in cash for inventory, right? Now, that's for inventory. If you plan on taking a course or, getting any sort of mentoring or consulting or anything like that, that's going to be an addition.
Okay.
But 5K is the minimum I recommend.
Okay. Because do you recommend they start with one product or 3 or 5?
Go wide. That's what you want to do when you start. The last thing I would ever recommend anybody do is, hey, you've got 5K to start this business. Last thing I would say is go spend that 5K on one product, or don't even spend that 5K on one brand, even if it's multiple products. Take that 5K and let's try to spread it out among as many products and as many brands as possible. Because again, we're trying to test wide so that we can go deep. Because if we take that 5K and we buy 25 different products, well, maybe 15 of those, maybe we make a little money, maybe we break even, but then 5 of those are going to be home runs and the other 5 are going to be, decent that we probably end up buying more of. But that's the goal, is we want to go wide before we go deep.
I'd have to think this through, but would it be feasible for a person to get some of those, the software, like SellerAmp, for example, or all 3 of them initially, and almost play with it saying, okay, let's just pretend I chose this product at this price point. Where would I be a month from now? How would I be? Is that possible to do it? That's a fantastic strategy. In fact, I've got a friend that he's recommended that strategy at length, that I've kind of stolen it from him, and I repeat it. I'm like, hey, I'm going to take that for my own. But no, it's almost like you're trading stocks. What do they call it? It's like you're trading on paper or something like that, where it's like, hey, if I were to buy this product and if I were to sell it 2 weeks later, would that have been a good decision just by looking at the data? That is a fantastic way to, with zero risk, zero capital spent aside from just the software cost, to decide, or really just to practice your buying and practice your sourcing, because that is where you make your money, is when you buy. And the better buyer you can become, the more money you're going to make. Right. Oh, okay. Great. Well, what's been the biggest challenge for you recently in the business?
So I'd say the biggest challenge for me has been capital, right? So we have a line of credit with our bank, which is great to have. But again, this is a capital intensive business, and we're to the point in our business where we've got more opportunities than capital. So every Amazon seller goes through two stages. Stage one is they've got more capital than opportunity, and stage two is they've got more opportunity than capital. We've been at stage two for a number of years now. So if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Corey, I'll lend you all this money at a decent rate. You just got to go spend it on inventory," I could have that done, no problem. The reason I don't aggressively pursue raising more money and getting more debt and all this stuff is just because I like to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And, we've got pretty hefty credit card bills as is. Of course, we pay them off each month. But in general, I'm a little more risk averse than most. And I just don't want to have, $500,000 in debt that I'm probably personally liable for. It should anything go wrong, worst case.
Right. And because of those high monthly credit card bills that you're paying off, you're racking up the points and you want to be able to use them for a holiday where you can actually relax and enjoy yourself.
Yes. And that is one of, if not the biggest, most underrated perk of being an Amazon seller is the credit card points and the credit card cash back. This year, the credit card cash back is going to pay for like 10% of my mortgage principal. And I just bought this house. So that's my goal, is take every dime in credit card cash back, throw it into the mortgage, and let's get it paid off in, a couple of years instead of 30, right? That's the goal there.
What a fantastic strategy, Corey. Congratulations. That's very cool. I love that.
Thank you.
You mentioned you have a team now. How long ago was that you started to add people to your company?
Yeah, so I've got two folks that work with me now. They're both located in the Philippines. So they're virtual employees located overseas. And one's named Criselda, one is Ralph. Criselda just hit her 5-year anniversary with me. So I think I hired her, it was early November of 2019. And then Ralph has been with me for, I think, just over 2 years now. So I always find my virtual employees on a website called onlinejobs.ph.
Okay.
It's essentially a job board for Filipino employees looking for virtual work. And my experience has been fantastic. These are really, really good people.
Wonderful. Well, about a month ago, I had a guest on and she said exactly the same thing.
It's like the best kept secret for hiring virtual employees. I think a lot of people will default to like an Upwork or like a Fiverr. And onlinejobs.ph, you've got to post your job posting, you've got to vet your candidates, you've got to do your own interview. So it is a little more work required, but that's how I found all my virtual employees, and they're great.
Great. And unlike Fiverr, when you reach out to that website, you're actually looking at hiring somebody that's with you consistently on your payroll per se, not by gig normally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, what's one piece of advice, Corey, you wish you had when you started?
So one piece of advice that I wish I had when I started is that, and it's a quote that I'm stealing from somewhere. I don't know who originally said this, but it's, you underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years and you overestimate what you can accomplish in 1 year. And my take on that quote is, I remember year one of wholesale. Remember, I was partnering with my dad and I was like, "Dad, we're going to sell $1 million this year on Amazon. It's going to be great. We're going to sell all these products." And come to find out, it wasn't until year 3 that we did 7 figures in revenue in a given year, right? So, and then, year 5 is really when I was like, okay, I actually think I somewhat know what I'm doing. We're actually starting to do better with this business. So it's having that long-term mindset. I just was way too short-sighted when we started.
Wise advice. In every business, there are times, it doesn't matter what industry it is or how long somebody's been in it, there are those moments where something happens, like the one that you described with the marine product. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, man, how are we going to get through this? What keeps you going through those times to keep pushing on?
Yeah, so I would just say the mindset of, and this is some advice that my dad gave me early on when I was considering quitting this business, right? This was shortly after I moved back home. We were going at it full time. We were trying to make it work. And it just wasn't working there for a little while. And his advice to me was, well, hey, you can always quit. So give it another week, give it another 2 weeks. And if you want to quit then do it, right? So it's just kind of having that mindset of like, well, I could always quit today. maybe I'll do it tomorrow, right? And then almost just like procrastinating on quitting, if that makes sense. And then eventually you're like, okay, that was a dumb idea. I'm just not going to quit.
Right. Something happens that it's like, okay, your renewed passion for it.
Yes, exactly. Because it's always a roller
Fabulous.
coaster. There's so many ups and downs.
Great. Even for those of you that are doing those 7-figure annual revenues and have been in it for 5+ years, you're still having those moments. So for those
Exactly.
people that
Oh,
are
yeah.
experiencing that in the beginning stages, you're definitely not alone. And it doesn't go away, so you have to deal with it.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Corey?
Yeah, so if they want to learn more about me and the Amazon business in general, I also host a podcast. It's called the Amazon Wholesale Podcast. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on YouTube as well. I would highly recommend, if they're going to start listening to my podcast, check out episode 76 with a guy named Sean. He is a fellow side hustler. He's got a full-time finance job in New York City. He's a younger guy, and he is doing my exact same business model on the side while working, 40, 50 hours a week in a Wall Street job. So I think that's an episode that a lot of folks in your audience would resonate with.
Sounds like a great fit, and I'll be sure to drop that link in the show notes.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Corey, for opening up your playbook on how to profitably sell brand name products on Amazon, and your guidance for people wanting to get into the business, and of course for being today's side hustle hero.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully we can do it again.
I look forward to it. We'll do a follow-up episode.
Would love to.
Corey sure packed this episode with valuable insights about the Amazon wholesale business. One of the standout strategies for me was how he's piggybacking on existing Amazon listings. That means you're not reinventing the wheel or spending money on marketing, which is a huge advantage for anyone starting out. I also love the idea we uncovered about using software to simulate buying decisions without risking any money on inventory. That's a brilliant way to gain hands-on experience, build confidence, and learn the platform, all without putting thousands of dollars on the line. And finally, his advice to go wide before going deep really stuck with me. Spreading your investment across a range of products instead of doubling down on just one or two. It's such a practical strategy for beginners and a great way to reduce risk while you're learning the ropes. Now it's your turn. What was your key takeaway? Maybe it was his dad's idea of, you can always quit. So give it another week. Give it another 2 weeks. Instead, ask, what small step can I take to move forward? Maybe today's the perfect day to take action, whether that's making progress on your existing side hustle or finally deciding on the one you want to pursue. Every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to the success you seek. Let me know your takeaway. I'd love to hear about it. Well, that's a wrap for today. In the episode description, you'll find a link to Corey's Amazon Wholesale podcast and specifically to episode 76, the one he recommended. You'll also see a link to my book, The Way Success Works, and my course, Turn Your Thoughts into Wanted Things, as well as a link back to the full show notes, which live at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying what you're seeing in this podcast, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and add your comment, share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.